my name is Hannah Salvatore. I'm one of the dietitians at Samaritan Hospital. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about a couple of things. First thing is whole grains. We're going to talk about the benefits, the health benefits of whole grains, and the fiber in whole grains and why that is important for our health. And then after that, we're going to talk about antioxidants and phytochemicals, which are some components of fruits and vegetables that are also very good for our health. But to get started, we'll start with the whole grains. So first off, I'll just ask you the question, why should we care about whole grains at all? If you remember way back in the day, the old food pyramid that was put up by the government, it's now the My Plate, but it used to be the food pyramid. If you remember at the very bottom, that biggest part of the pyramid was the grains category. So grains make up a rather large part of our diets. And so it is important to make sure that the grains that we are eating are going to be more healthy than the grains that are processed, which are the ones that are a little less healthy. Because grains tend to be one of the biggest food groups, it's also a place where we can get a lot of our calories. So the types of calories that we eat also makes a difference in our health. So we want to try to choose more of the whole grains over processed grains. So I'm going to define these things for you a little bit before we continue. I'm going to talk to you about what a whole grain is and then what a processed or a refined grain is so that you understand exactly what the difference is. So here on my board, I have an example for you of a whole grain. So you can imagine this is like a kernel of wheat. The whole grain is composed of three different parts. The outside layer, which is right here, that's the bran. Maybe you've heard of bran cereal or bran as a part of a product that has a lot of fiber in it. So bran products are usually whole grain products, but they can also be products that have had this bran added to it separately. The bran part of the whole grain is very high in fiber. It's very high in B vitamins. So it has vitamins B1, 2, and 3, which is thiamine, niacin, and riboflavin. It also has vitamin B6 in it, which if you haven't had that class yet, or maybe you will have it in the future, B6 is also an integral part of making serotonin, which is a hormone. It's really good for you. And then the bran also has minerals in it, like selenium, which is an antioxidant, which is one of those things we're going to talk about in a little bit. So that's the first layer of the whole grain. The next layer of the whole grain is this big white part right here. That is the starch. So that right there is chock full of carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are what give us all of the energy. So you've heard of carbo loading maybe before you go and run or jog outside, run a race. Carbohydrates are the easiest way for our bodies to get energy. And grains are full of the carbohydrates. These carbohydrates are, if the seed was put in the ground to grow, are what help this thing right here, the germ, which is also the seed. That's what would help the seed to grow. It's all that energy in there. So if you notice, the starch is the biggest part of the grain. And then finally we have the germ, or the seed. It's that little bit right there. That's the part that would eventually turn into a plant. The germ is very, very nutrient rich. It's also very full of a lot of the B vitamins, including folic acid, which is another B vitamin that is also in the bran. Vitamin E, which is also an antioxidant, is found in the germ, along with a little bit of some fats, actually, and they're healthy fats. They're good for you. And then it also has phytochemicals in it, which, like the antioxidants, is something we're going to talk a little bit about later. So just keep that in mind. So these are the three components to a whole grain. Now, if you're buying a food in the grocery store and it looks very white, like it doesn't have a nice brown color, like white bread, for instance, or Wonder Bread, it's what's called a processed grain. So the processing of a grain removes this bran right here and removes the germ. So you're left with just the starchy part, which is that nice white, soft, carbohydrate-rich core. And so those grain products that are processed, it makes a really nice, soft, very sweet almost product. And so we kind of grew to like that, to prefer that over the grain or the products that were made with whole grains, which tend to be a little rougher and have a slightly different taste to them. So the implication, though, maybe you've already seen it, is that if you're eating a processed grain product, you're missing out on all the really good stuff that you get from the bran. So you're missing out on a lot of the B vitamins from the bran and the germ. You're going to end up missing out on a lot of the fiber, and then you're going to be missing out on a couple other things too, like your minerals and some of your phytochemicals. So that's why it is kind of important to try to choose the whole grains over the processed grains. I'm just going to give you real quick some examples of some whole grains that maybe you hadn't thought of, in addition to like a wheat kernel. Popcorn is also a whole grain, so if you like popcorn the way I do, I eat it all the time. So you're actually eating a whole grain when you have popcorn. Brown rice is another whole grain, so that's basically a white rice that still has the bran on it, and that bran is brown. So if it's a brown rice, it is a whole grain. And then oatmeal. So if you like to eat oatmeal in the morning for breakfast, congrats, you've eaten a whole grain. And then some examples of refined grains or processed grains: white bread, flour tortillas, white rice, and then multigrain bread. We'll talk a little bit about multigrain bread in just a second. So now you understand the difference between a whole grain and a processed grain. So now the next step is identifying one in the grocery store. Okay? So the first thing that you want to do to determine whether a product is whole grain or processed grain is you want to check the package. You can go straight for the nutrition label if you want, or you can actually look on the front, and products that are whole grain are going to have what's called the Whole Grains Council stamp on it. Basically, it's a circle and it has a sheaf of wheat in it. If it's got that stamp on it, then you know that that product is made with a whole grain flour. So that's one easy way to identify it. It'll be right on the front. And then after that, you can check the nutrition label if you don't see one, or if you don't see the Whole Grain Council stamp, you can check the nutrition label. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look below the nutrition label at the ingredients list. And if the ingredients list says anything like enriched wheat flour or enriched white flour or white flour, then that's going to be a processed grain. A whole grain product is going to say 100% whole wheat on the ingredients list, and that's how you know that it's being made from flour that came from the entire wheat kernel. So enriched wheat flour, that refers to a process by which some of these things that are taken out in the processing, like the B vitamins, those are actually added back into the white flour after the grain has been processed. Because go figure, they figured out that when you're missing out on all of these nice B vitamins, it's a lot easier to become deficient in those vitamins. So the government actually mandated that companies that were using the white flours to make things like bread and cereals had to actually add some of this stuff back in. The only problem is that you might get some more of your B vitamins and stuff added back in, but you're also going to be missing out on things like the selenium, which is an antioxidant, the vitamin E, which is an antioxidant, and the fiber. So you don't get everything back from an enriched white product. But I just wanted you to understand what that was. So then we come to the multigrain product. So sometimes you'll be looking at that ingredients list and it'll say enriched white flour will be the first ingredient, and then maybe it'll have something in it like oatmeal, and then the third ingredient or fourth ingredient would be 100% whole wheat flour. So technically that is a multigrain product because it is made using flours from multiple sources, so it's multigrain product. But those are still not usually a whole grain product because normally the first ingredient in those is still going to be that enriched white flour. So it's not a bad choice, but just keep in mind that it's not quite the same thing as a whole grain product. All right? So now you know a lot about what a whole grain is versus what a processed grain is, and now you know how to identify a whole grain product from a processed grain product. So then I'm just going to recap for you why should you care about choosing a whole grain product over a refined grain product. Again, you lose a lot of things from the processing of a grain that you don't get back in the enriched flour. So the fiber and then a couple of antioxidants, which are really good for you. So you get those back if you're choosing a whole grain product. They also, in my personal opinion, I think that sometimes they taste better than a white product. From a white grain product, you are going to get more of a softer, sweeter taste, and with some dishes, maybe that's appropriate. Maybe that does taste better. But you get a lot of nice earthy nutty flavors with a whole grain product that can actually complement a meal really well. And then I specifically want to highlight for you the health benefits of fiber, because that's one of those things that you don't get from the processed grains that you would get from a whole grain. So fiber, you probably are automatically thinking, oh, it's good for your digestive health. And it is. That is what we most know fiber, is for. But fiber actually has a lot of different health benefits, including it helps to keep your blood sugar under control. So a diet high in fiber is going to prevent your blood sugar from getting really high or maybe even really low. So that will just in general make you feel better, whether you're a diabetic or not. It's also good to help with cholesterol. So if you're eating a meal that has a lot of cholesterol in it, like eggs, for instance, for breakfast in the morning, and you have yourself a nice piece of whole grain toast or whole wheat toast with your eggs, the fiber in that toast is actually going to bind, or it's going to snatch up some of that cholesterol in your GI tract so your body doesn't absorb it. So in that way, a fiber can actually help to keep your cholesterol levels under control. That's why you'll see that on like the oatmeal packages. It can help lower your cholesterol. So if you're having a high fiber food, like a whole grain, or fruits and vegetables, which also have a lot of fiber in them, along with a food that has cholesterol in it, can help to prevent your body from absorbing some of that cholesterol. All right. So then the fiber, like I said, is found in the whole grains. It's also found in fruits and vegetables. Most fruits and vegetables have fiber in them. That's actually what helps those foods. The fruits and vegetables are very, very high in water, like all plants. They're high in water. So in order to help keep the fruit or vegetable shape, it needs a lot of strong structure to it, and that's what the fiber is. So the fiber, there's actually two different types of fiber. The first type of fiber is called soluble fiber, and that's a little bit of a smaller fiber. It's one that your gut bacteria like to eat. So it is good for your digestive system in the sense that it gives your good gut flora something to munch on so that they get to live happy lives. And so then they also kind of helps to form a gel in your GI tract that eases the transit of your bowel movements. So it prevents constipation by just helping everything to get through nicely. The other type of fiber is insoluble fiber. So that is a fiber that helps to pack your stools together. So that's kind of more of the stringy fiber, like I think of celery when I think of insoluble fiber. So that kind of fiber helps to keep everything packed together, which also just eases the transit of your bowel movements through your GI tract and helps to keep your bowel movements regular. So some examples of soluble fiber, a good one actually, apples and oatmeal. So that's a good gel fiber. And then insoluble fiber are found in a lot of the tough stringy vegetables like celery and carrots and cauliflower. All right, so that's a little bit about fiber and some of the health benefits of fiber. I hope that inspires you to choose whole grains. If you are deciding to add more fiber into your diet, if you're very inspired by this and you want to start increasing your fiber intake, there are just a couple things you need to keep in mind. The first one is that you got to do it slowly. So you don't want to go from eating just a little bit of fiber to all the fiber all at once, because that can actually cause a lot of GI issues. That might cause more constipation. It can also be kind of sensory overload for those good bacteria in your gut that I mentioned. All of a sudden they're like drowning in fiber and like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So you have to kind of slowly increase your intake so that your gut flora, your gut bacteria, they get used to it. You also have to make sure that as you increase your fiber intake, you have to increase your hydration and make sure that you're drinking enough fluids during the day. Because what can happen is if you eat too much fiber and you're not drinking enough fluids, that can also cause constipation and irritation to your bowels, and then you'll have to start all over again with increasing the fiber in your diet, and you don't want to have to do that. So just keep in mind, fiber's good for you, but if you haven't been eating a lot of fiber already, you got to eke it up pretty slowly. All right, so then now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about antioxidants and phytochemicals. All right, so we just talked about whole grains, and we talked about two things that we get from whole grains that we don't get from processed grains that are also antioxidants. One's vitamin E and one is selenium. So now we're going to talk a little bit about antioxidants, where we find them, what they do, and we're also going to talk about phytochemicals, okay? So what is an antioxidant? It's a substance, like a phytochemical. It's a substance that's found primarily in fruits and vegetables, but also, as we've seen, in whole grains. And it's something that helps to protect the cells in our body from being damaged by what's called a free radical. All right, so what happens is a free radical is it's an oxygen molecule that just by process of living and then exposure to certain things like radiation, ultraviolet light, pro-inflammatory foods like fried foods, alcohol, drugs, other chemicals, these free radicals form in our bodies from the oxygen that we breathe. So it's difficult to, you can't avoid producing free radicals, is what I'm trying to say. They're just kind of like a fact of life. But these free radicals, so there's an oxygen molecule that kind of gets angry because one of its electrons gets knocked off. I don't know if you remember anything from like your high school chemistry classes, but the oxygen has a certain number of electrons and that makes it stable. When one of those electrons is taken away, the oxygen molecule gets mad, gets a little crazy. And what it does is it kind of bounces around in your body and it just like wreaks havoc. So it'll hit your cells and it damages the structure of your cells, and over time, the more cells are damaged, the more tissues are damaged, and over a long period of time, that can contribute to organ damage and eventually to chronic diseases. So what an antioxidant does, as it's one of these chemicals or substances that we get from fruits and vegetables, it has a little extra electron. So what it does is it goes around your body, and when it finds these angry oxygen molecules, it'll give its extra electron to the oxygen molecule, thus rendering it calm. So it's stable again, it's happy, and it does its little oxygen thing and helps to keep your tissues healthy instead of damaging them. So that is the point of an antioxidant, is that it helps to prevent the damage caused by those free radicals. And again, like I said, because tissue damage over time becomes organ damage, antioxidants are really important to help prevent chronic diseases because it ultimately prevents your organs from being damaged. And then antioxidants actually are also thought to help fight off illnesses, so like bacterial illnesses or viral illnesses. So that's one of the reasons why they say, eat your vitamin C and it'll help to prevent sickness or ward off sickness. So that's the antioxidants in the vitamin C. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, so it's the antioxidants in your citrus fruits that will help to do that. So I have listed for you some examples of antioxidants over here. So two of those should seem very familiar to you, the selenium and the vitamin E. We already talked about those. Those come from the whole grains, from the bran and from the germ. Selenium is the only one of those four that is a mineral. The other three are vitamins. So the selenium is, like as a mineral, it's found primarily in the soil. So any kind of fruit or vegetable that grows in the soil is going to have some selenium in it depending on the soil quality. So where you live actually impacts the amount of selenium that's going to be in your produce. So if you're curious about it, you can go online and you can look up your agricultural department's chapter wherever you live. Check out the selenium content of the soil and you'll see if your local produce is going to be contributing selenium in your diet or not. So some examples of foods that tend to be high in selenium are actually Brazil nuts, mushrooms, pinto beans, brown rice, as long as it has that bran on it, and the endosperm, or the germ in it, cabbage, and spinach. So those tend to be high in selenium. Vitamin C is probably also one that's familiar to you. We know vitamin C, citrus fruits, and vitamin C won't get you sick. It's because of that. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. So in addition to citrus fruits, kiwis, papaya, strawberries, broccoli, cauliflower again, Brussels sprouts, and even white potatoes are decent sources of vitamin C. Generally speaking, vitamin C is found in just about every fruit and vegetable to some extent. So you can rest assured that if you have a diet that's high in your fruits and vegetables, then you're going to be getting enough vitamin C. Vitamin E is one of what's called fat-soluble vitamins. So it's a vitamin that is linked to the fats that you eat. That's why in the model of the whole grain that you just saw, in the germ, the vitamin E is linked with that little bit of healthy fats that you get from the whole grains. So that vitamin E is found in other plant sources of oils like vegetable oils, canola oil, olive oil, and then in your whole grains, of course. Vitamin E is also going to be found in nuts and nut oils like sunflower oil, safflower oil, corn oil, soybeans, peanuts, almonds, hazelnuts. So if you cook with your oils and if you eat nuts like peanut butter, you'll be getting some vitamin E along with that. And then lastly, vitamin A is another antioxidant. So vitamin A and beta carotene, which is also a phytochemical, which we'll talk about in just a second, those are found in sweet potatoes and pumpkin, carrots, apricots, bell peppers, most of the winter squashes like butternut squash, anything that has that nice like orangey red color. So the vitamin A is yet another antioxidant. So throughout every season, you have the opportunity to get your antioxidants from your fruits and vegetables. All right. Okay, so then we'll talk also about phytochemicals. Phytochemicals, like antioxidants, are also substances that are found in fruits and vegetables that have health benefits. They help to prevent tissue damage. But they're kind of more mysterious than antioxidants. We don't really know as much about them than we do the vitamins and the selenium. So they're kind of like a superhero. They're in disguise. We don't really know exactly what they're doing, but somewhere in the night they're keeping us safe. And also, like superheroes, they tend to be really brightly colored. So if you think about the variety of colors in fruits and vegetables, that is, those pigments in the fruits and vegetables are linked with the phytochemicals. So that's why maybe you've heard somebody say, the more dense the coloration of the food that you're eating, the healthier it is for you. And that's because the idea is the denser the color, the more the phytochemicals it's going to have in it. So I have here for you 4 phytochemicals I'm going to go over real quick. So the first one is called an anthocyanin. That is a phytochemical that is associated with blues, reds, and purples. So kind of anything on the purple range. So maybe, first thing you think of, blueberries. Berries are full of antioxidants and phytochemicals. So berries, blackberries, eggplant, cherries, carrots, purple corn, and red cabbage are all really good sources of the anthocyanins. Another one is called lutein. Lutein is actually kind of more of, it's an aberration, it's kind of more of a colorless phytochemical, but it is found in a lot of leafy green foods. So if you think, lutein, you can think leafy greens. It's also found in egg yolks, kind of funny. And then spinach, kale, turnip greens, collard greens, romaine lettuce, broccoli, all the leafy green stuff is going to have the lutein in it. So you can think of lutein as kind of like the green phytochemical if you want. Beta carotene, we already mentioned that. This phytochemical is actually what is called a precursor to vitamin A. So when you eat the beta carotene, that will become vitamin A in your body once your body has had time to process it into the vitamin A. So if you're eating the beta carotene, you will eventually get vitamin A from it. So the beta carotene is found in like the orange produce, like carrots, for instance, bell peppers, pumpkin, butternut squash, all the same things that you would find the vitamin A in. Then the final phytochemical is lycopene. You may have heard of this one. You may have seen it on the back of your bottle of ketchup. Lycopene is found in reds and orange vegetables, so kind of more on the orange spectrum. First thing I think of is tomatoes. This lycopene is actually especially available to your body after tomatoes have been cooked. So ketchup is like the perfect way to get your lycopene. It's also found in watermelon, grapefruit, mango. And lycopene is thought to be especially important for prostate health. So you guys, if you like to eat your burgers, go ahead and have some ketchup with it and some tomato. And you'll get some of your lycopene that way. So that's just a rundown of the different types of antioxidants and the different types of phytochemicals. We talked a little bit about how the antioxidants help to calm down the free radicals so that they don't make they don't wreak havoc on your tissues and eventually like damage everything. So the antioxidants are really good to help keep you healthy, help keep your organs healthy. So I hope you learned something, and I hope that you also enjoy the little post quiz that we have after this. and test your knowledge and see how much you learned.